Hey folks, Phil Gallagher here. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be posting a video of one of my tutoring sessions, and I'm just going to post the gameplay rounds. So this was a tutoring session with normal 60 card D and T that I did, well, last night for me, probably about a week ago for you all. So just kind of a couple of heads up about the content itself. Number one, this is unedited content because I'm working together with another person here. It's a little harder for me to successfully splice out the dead air and whatnot with two different people talking. So this will be unedited. Most of the rounds go pretty quickly, except the first one, which is about 15 minutes long. It's a real slogfest. Thing number two, I am not driving during this. The person I am tutoring is going and doing all the button presses and stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is some pretty high quality content, and I hope you all enjoy. And if you do enjoy, throw me a like, maybe subscribe if you're new here. That sort of thing helps out a lot. Let's battle. All right. So what do you think of your opening hand here?
It always makes me slightly nervous if it gets countered, but I think it's a keep because we have a good curve if the vial lands.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, there's always some risk in keeping a one land either veil hand, but like the hand itself is quite powerful. I think you are correct to not mulligan here, and
I like
we're
I
probably
like
not
seeing
getting
people.
countered.
Right.
What do you think our opponent's playing?
Um, well, I was going to say lands, but I don't think they usually play blue. Um,
Well,
Most
the
Maverick.
Dryad Arbor is the weirder thing here.
I would have guessed Maverick again, but Tropical is weird for them as well.
Yeah, we're gonna have to make some. You can go ahead and like take your draw step and whatever. Like 100% of the time, we're going plains vile here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just like to start thinking about that question from like very, very early on. So we could be playing against a blue Maverick deck. There are some blue cards that are quite good in the current metagame. We could be playing against a four-color loam deck of some kind.
Okay.
That's kind of where my head is currently at. We'll probably find out pretty darn quickly.
I believe Brian published one of those today, so I often do see an uptick in whatever he published that day.
Yeah, the content creator effect is very real. When someone like me or Brian produces a league with something, you'll see it a lot in the next week. I got a lot of messages like, Phil, I just lost to that fucking dwarf bugs deck. Why did you play that?
That's different though. That wasn't in his list. So I'm back to thinking some blue Maverick type deck.
Okay, we also might be playing against something along the lines of normally I would call it like a green white depths deck. We might be
Mhm.
playing against a dark depths deck that is playing the green and blue for Uro because well, that card's obnoxious.
Yep. Um, so normally I would play out the Thalia here, but he's ahead on mana and doing a lot of creature based stuff, so I don't know the value is there. It
Also,
might.
don't forget the obvious. Your opponent just played a Caracas, so we're probably never
Yep.
going to invest mana in Thalia this game.
That's a good call. So my instinct here would be to play out the Stoneforge, although the Tropical gives me some pause. I could wait one turn and use Vial to play around Days.
I would probably not be too worried about days from your opponent. It's something that could exist, but you have such high card quality that I would just jam the Stoneforge here.
My instinct would be Compleat, but um,
Sounds good?
yeah, yeah, it would be. I forgot I had Jite in hand, so it
Yeah.
didn't matter.
So you already have something in hand that can gain you, 2 points of life if you need to end up going above 20 to survive a Merit Lodge hit.
Yep.
So some of the more interesting questions will happen if you draw a land on your next turn. Because then the world is kind of your oyster, and you get Recruiter of the Guard lines opening up, you get Skyclave lines opening up, and you also do just have this Cauldra, that you could try to just go aggro with. Your opponent is at 11,
Right.
so just trying to turbo end the game is not crazy. Like right now, they're at 10. That's 2 Cauldra hits. Taiga.
Plateau.
I wonder if our opponent is playing a prismatic ending sort of situation here.
Okay. You're punishing fire.
All right.
Or another reclaimer, probably.
Probably. They're going to have 2 3/4s now, which is pretty good.
That is.
Now, something to be keeping in mind here is that Elvish Reclaimer and tutor for a Grove of the Burn Willows, so a lot of your smaller creatures are not going to end up being super safe here.
Okay.
All right, so what's your plan?
Well, I think he has insulation against removing any one of these, although it still might be good because that 6 power is a lot. Library is still scary, although he's getting a little low, so he's got to be worried about that. So I would consider removing library, but that's not high up on my list anymore. Um, I could recruit for something more impactful, or I could remove a reclaimer. Are the two things I'm deciding between?
Okay. So in these situations where you're not sure, the question that I most commonly ask is like, how do you intend on winning this game? Are you going to win this game by controlling your opponent's board? Are you going to win this game by reducing their life total to 0? What is the path you see? How do you want to play this out?
I think it's more likely to succeed since he's already low with a life total approach. So maybe recruiting for another mystic would be a good play to get the Cauldron in play.
Okay, well, let's go for it then. Let's see how it works out.
But if he gets a Grove, I'm it's not likely the mystic lives long enough to be impactful.
Okay, now if they tutor with Elvish Reclaimer, the land enters tapped, right?
Mhm.
So you could have a window to successfully put in a Stoneforge Mystic and get that thing to work in this turn cycle.
Okay, I'm gonna go for it.
All right, sounds good.
Taking just a moment to make sure something significantly better didn't appear to me there. Um, and no need to do it now.
Yeah, you can wait. You can
Yeah.
see if something changes. Yeah. So Death and Taxes, generally speaking, is a deck with a ton of options, and so a lot of times you have to pick a path to win the game. So, for example, you could have chosen a different path where you say, I want to answer both of these Elvish Reclaimers over 2 turns. Or you could have chosen a path where, okay, I'm going to Recruiter of the Guard for Sanctum Prelate, and I'm going to use that to shut off Punishing Fire. And like there's tons of different lines available to you, and you just kind of have to pick a lane. It's when you
Right.
start going like halfway one direction and halfway the other direction without a clear plan that a lot of times you end up in this weird, awkward middle ground where you're not quite doing anything well.
But I also not want to fall into the trap of continuing on a line that's no longer working.
Yep, that's fair.
Um,
A chump
I
block
don't.
is okay if you don't see yourself flicker wisping this creature in the next few turn cycles.
That's what I was thinking. I would have to draw and want to do that instead. He did turn off the crop rotation effect here by trying to get in.
Yeah, your opponent is viewing themselves as the beatdown right now. They have 6 power in play. You have either
Yeah.
1 or 0, depending on like where things are at come this turn cycle. So they are trying to close this out before your superior card quality does them in.
Keith and Tyga. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Wow, okay. I was not expecting. There are truly four colors here. All right.
Yeah, we should probably assume our opponent is not on black, but otherwise they're dipping pretty deep into the color pie.
Ragavan, of
Okay.
course.
I wonder if this is Connor's build. Connor Fulse, aka Lomer Boy, posted a build today in the four color loam chat. I wonder if this is his shenanigans.
Okay.
Probably safe to assume you're gonna tick that up. We got some great options.
Of course, I draw the flicker wisp.
Always.
All right. Yep. Um. Okay. Well, I expect I am going to clave something. Well, yeah. Now that I have 2/3 drops, the flicker wisp on the vial is nice. Um.
So your plan is to kill your opponent with
Yep.
Cauldron, right?
Yeah. So I don't think there's a much risk in starting down that road here, right?
No, you're probably fine to go ahead and do your Cauldron attack. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you can make your attack. The real question becomes, what, if anything else, are you doing with the rest of your turn cycle? So let me ask you this: what beats your Cauldron right now that you think your opponent might be playing?
Plowshares, or ending.
Okay, can you play around either of those?
No.
Yes, you can.
The
What?
flicker wisp on vial.
Yeah. So if your opponent goes for a poorly timed prismatic ending that is at sorcery speed, you
Hmm.
can flicker your Cauldron and still have a lethal attack next turn.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. Now, you also can just have, any number of mid combat blowouts. Kind of one of our hopes here is that our opponent specifically does not have the instant speed swords to plowshares, because that is a little harder for us to play around.
That will get him over.
Yep. So that puts our opponent out of just a single Cauldron hit. And this is something that we're going to have to think about for the future as well. So how has your mindset changed in the last 30 seconds? What are you thinking now?
Um, the only thing I'm considering is because he doesn't currently have the right colors. I was considering Skyclave to prevent that from coming back.
That is a possibility, but yeah, your opponent doesn't have it right now.
Yeah.
That's something you could do, but this game might end before the Uro comes back.
Okay.
Because, like, remember, Flicker Wisp is also worth 3 points of damage in the air, right?
Yep. So one thing I would consider is using Flicker in the instep to remove one of the.
All right.
He's got to have an instant speed answer then,
It's
right?
it's very possible. Now, you are only showing 6 damage. Your opponent could just do something as simple as play another blocker. So now is a moment where, oh well,
Oh,
I guess we're taking that at this point. You could still skyclave, but
ah, okay. That's fair.
so for example, you could have skyclaved a recruiter traded with a Ragavan or something like that.
So he did have, okay. I forgot he hadn't made a land drop. So he'll go to 10. I have 9. Unfortunate.
So now you've got a handful of ways you could play this. You could, for example, simply just remove the Uro with Skyclave, crash in for 7, and then keep a Flicker Wisp or a Palace Jailer around to make sure that you don't die on the backswing next turn.
Yeah, that's where my mind went.
Okay.
So hearing you say it, yeah, I think I'll pick up for the sake of Jailer.
Are you sure?
No,
So if
I
you leave the
I
vial at 3, you could use Flicker Wisp in this turn cycle and Palace Jailer in the following turn cycle. Whereas if you tick up, you lose the availability of that line.
off of Vial, I could still do Flicker Wisp with lands if but you said this cycle, having it at instant speed is more
Yeah,
important.
I mean, you can also tick up if you want. And if you tick up, you can put in Palace Jailer, flicker it, get a second thing, and play more defensively in the next turn cycle. And that probably wins you the game too.
I'm gonna say no though. Okay. I think go in for 7. He knows about Batterskull, so he's gonna have to respect that on his attack.
Yeah, so you probably crash in for 7 and call it a turn. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm still gonna.
Yeah, like life's pretty good. Like
Mhm.
you get to put in a batter skull, really makes combat hard for your opponent. Then you get to flicker a Cauldra, and then next turn you can tick up File, do Palace Jailer. If you draw a land,
Yeah.
you also have Jitte. So I think we are looking at Connor Folse's Lomer Boys pile.
Okay.
There's 3 Elvish Reclaimers, 4 Ragavans, Ooze, Endurance, Knight of the Reliquary, Uro. Prismatic Ending is why there's all the white. Whatever this is going to enter tapped, which is good news for us.
Do they play Chasm?
No, about the scariest thing is a Maze of Ith or a Blast Zone.
Field of the Dead. Okay. Does he have a land drop?
So they
Oh,
can
he's
create
got
another zombie with Elvish Reclaimer.
and the Excavator.
This may be a game where you have to end up doing the last couple of points of damage in the air.
Hmm. I will want to flicker before the instep, right? So, well, culture has haste, so it doesn't matter that much, right? But no, I do want it in on this turn though.
Yeah, you probably want to flicker their second main phase if you intend on targeting the Cauldra. That is a lot of zombies.
Yep.
Honors list did not have Field of the Dead, so it looks like somebody has been making some small changes.
Is that still? I think that's still my intent.
Okay.
I think Cauldra still does a lot on this board.
Cauldra does do a lot. Cauldra plus Batterskull is a lot of pressure. Another thing you can do is put in a Jitte if you think that is going to be better than Batterskull. I'm not sure that it is, but if you get a Jitte, you can try to um, play around at like a punishing fire, removing a flicker wisp. The Maze of Ith on the other side of the battlefield is a little problematic as well.
Ooh, yeah. Would not. All right. It's a good question. I think the charge counters of. I think I like the Batterskull here more.
Okay.
I reasoned if I drew the land, Jite would be an option as well, but Batterskull wouldn't have been.
Right.
Um, okay. I need to do anything with this pre-combat.
So you have options, but also keep in mind if your opponent is going to get into multi-block situations, a mid-combat Palace Jailer could do some weird things as well.
So my instinct here is to attack with these three.
Okay. We can probably make that work.
So he does have block with Ragavan and return it, but doesn't save him that much.
Yeah, if they see like block with Ragavan on the Batterskull, you know, that's a little annoying.
If he doesn't double block here,
So if your opponent doesn't double block, they die.
right,
Because, yeah.
because of the jailer in trample. That's fine, I think.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So now the next question is which two of your opponent's creatures do you want to remove? Do you want to
Oof.
remove the Ramunap and one Reclaimer, or do you want to remove both Reclaimers?
I think it's going to be important. See, why do I think that? I actually don't know how important the Reminap is going to be because
The Ramunap represents two zombies off of fetch land.
that's true. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do all of our damage in the air. But that would have to that would mean the Flicker Wisp would have to live. So that is probably important. I would want to remove the Excavator and one Reclaimer.
Okay, so go ahead and do it.
And that is
So you would put in the palace jailer, and you'd remove one thing, and then you would blink your palace jailer to remove another thing. Now we're going to get an extra card here, which hopefully means that we can work towards another land drop, so that we can, deploy the Jitte and do other things with that. Although, honestly, we're kind of hoping that this game ends in about another turn cycle.
move the excavator. That'll be good for maze, I think. Hopefully it won't be necessary, but
You have a very large amount of raw power on the battlefield. Um, in Connor's version, there's not a tabernacle in the main deck; it's in the sideboard. So I don't
that
want to say
makes
we don't have to worry about that, but
even then we'd be left with 4 creatures. Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
So at a macro level, what's your post sideboard plan? What do you want?
Um, I would like as much as possible to deny him the recurring value and resources. So in my mind, I'm thinking surgical because of all of his graveyard recursion and maybe the rip.
Okay. I definitely like Rest in Peace. Now, Rest in Peace is going to stop Loam, it's going to stop Punishing Fire, it's going to stop Uro. That card is very strong. So
Hmm.
I'd say, like, Rest in Peace of your sideboard cards here is easily the best one. I'd say that Surgical is probably a tier below that because, so for example, a Surgical is not great at shrinking an Elvish Reclaimer. All right.
Fair.
This is going to be a relatively slow and grindy matchup like we just saw. That means that your Court of Grace is probably worth considering as well. And if you have brought in another win condition like that, you can also start thinking about whether you want to play something like a Path to Exile. So if you keep big things from like Uro to Knight of the Reliquary to Reclaimer from going and getting in there, like that becomes pretty good. It's also another answer to Ragavan.
That's true. It's an early answer, which is important.
And you do have 2 paths.
Um, all right.
Whether or not you play both is another thing. Council's Judgment is also not crazy. All right, so what don't you like from the main deck?
I think Thalia's value here is pretty low.
I'll agree with that.
Whether it's Caracas or the fact that they're doing a lot with creatures and generally are ahead on mana. I think I like Mom because of their removal. Spirits, I mean, it's great if they've got
Yep,
a
Spirit
library
Spirit
that does
seems
it right.
medium minus. I would probably junk those.
Um, I like all of these, I
Uh,
think.
what do you think of the Solitude?
Um, Probably not worth 2 for 1.
Okay, so let's pull that out. So those are 7 cards we want out. We definitely bring in those first 5. If you want to bring in the Surgicals, that is 7. You can also consider bringing in Council's Judgment.
I like that. And maybe the Warder?
You
Uh,
you could also play the Surgicals that you were thinking about.
I'm very low on time, so I'm
Okay,
gonna.
no, that's fine. Um, like I said, don't worry about like timing out or anything like that. When you're talking through lines like this, your games and decisions go much longer than normal. Just talking about one thing that we didn't get to, you also could have considered swapping Jitte for Sword of Fire and Ice, because Sword of Fire and Ice offers protection against Punishing Fire.
That's a great point.
All right.
Um,
What do you think of this hand?
I don't love it. It's probably okay. I don't like this is already in my hand. I like the early answer to Rag, um, but they're also non-basics against a deck that I know runs Wasteland.
Yeah, this is kind of a medium minus hand. You could keep this and it would be okay some of the time. You would keep this and you would get wastelanded on turn one and lose some portion of the time. I
I
could see
I
mulliganing for a more stable hand. I also don't think it's crazy to keep this. I would probably mulligan, but
I
I
my
wouldn't fault
instinct is
someone
that
for keeping.
I don't mulligan enough. And then of course you get no white.
Yeah, this one's an easy mulligan. Find a good 5. This is the best of the hands we've seen so far, pretty easily, I think.
Absolutely. Um, Court's not gonna come out for a while, and surgical is only a maybe good.
I think surgical goes
Like
back 100% of the time. And then I think your second decision is tougher. It is between the Rishadenport and the Court of Grace.
I like the inevitability of court,
Okay,
so I
so
think
throw
I'm gonna
back your
throw
land.
back the port.
It's not crazy to throw back a land on the draw there, especially since you do want something powerful that can just win you the game if it resolves after taking a double mulligan.
Okay.
That's probably the... Well, it's a bad draw. Maybe not the worst draw in the
Yeah.
deck, but it's a bad draw. So what we don't want to see here is our opponent going Punishing Fire into Grove. That would tear apart our current hand pretty badly.
Yep. Which of these? Jeskai? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That could have been worse.
All right. Great
Well,
draw.
yeah, I think I might take a turn off of Mystic.
I agree. Because if you play Mystic and Ragavan connects and finds something good or accelerates your
Yeah.
opponent into scary stuff,
Is there
it's just not the best for you.
any reason to wait? I don't think so.
There is a reason to wait. If your opponent has a second Ragavan,
They could
they
dash
could
it.
dash it in. So you probably want to wait on that until combat. The same might not be true against like a true blue deck, but against this one, we probably want to wait till combat.
That's entirely fair.
Yeah.
Yep. I just realized I almost did it then, invalidating the entire reason for waiting. Or nope, library. Okay.
That's pretty good, but hopefully the things that we have that pressure our opponent's life total put us in a good position.
I don't. Jitte is only good if they can remove mist. If they have to remove Mystic, I could play it. But if they remove Mystic, I won't have a creature to put it on. So I think it's just Batterskull here.
I might counter offer with Jitte.
Okay.
So if your Stoneforge Mystic gets removed, you currently have no plays for your next turn, and putting a Jitte into play would be something that you could do with your mana if you don't draw a land. And conceptually, Batterskull and Kaldra end up occupying the same space. They're only good if the Stoneforge is around. So if you end up, having a 3, 4, 5, 7 drop in your hand, and you miss on lands for a couple of turns, you'd rather have something that you can invest your mana in.
I think that makes sense.
Now, if we had brought in the Sword of Fire and Ice, that might have been a great time to grab that as well. We would have grabbed either Jitte or Sword of Fire and Ice, whichever one was actually available.
Yep. That was a good turn. But that happens when you have a library.
Oh yeah, like Library or Dark Confidant, like cards of that nature do a ton of work for this archetype.
Okay. Um, I like the idea of removing either the reclaimer or the library.
Okay. Which one do you like better?
Um, well, he hasn't used the library proactively yet, so I like that because it's a way for him to pull ahead on resources while reclaimer trades essentially one for one.
Okay. What does your opponent get if they activate Elvish Reclaimer?
Um, Probably Grove of the Burn Willows for the Punishing Fire, which I'd rather not see. So
Okay.
Reclaimer would probably be a better kill removal.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yep.
Keep in mind, the way that you are trying to win this game is with Court of Grace, right? So the fewer creatures your opponent has in play, the less able they are to threaten your monarchy. And if you remain the monarch, you will bury your opponent in angels.
That's right.
So even if that Punishing Fire wasn't in the graveyard, you might want to err on the side of removing the Reclaimer there.
All right. He's being a little more conservative with the library this game.
Well, Kaldra threatens to,
Yeah.
2-turn clock them if they go too aggressive with Library before they find an Uro.
Okay. Not a terrible draw.
Not at all.
So I think for the same reason I like removing the Reclaimer and playing Jitte.
Sounds good. And we probably want to remove the Reclaimer at sorcery speed, just don't give them that chance to get the Grove.
And I think I like the attack here.
The attack seems fine. Um, you can't be punished by an Endurance because that Triome doesn't tap for green.
And yeah, that's just guy. Yep. Tranquil Thicket and a Punishing Fire.
Sure. So if you get a Jitte hit in, you declare your opponent of 2 creatures, which is kind of cool.
Although I feel pretty far away from that the next couple turns.
Yes. Just can't get a break from these Elvish Reclaimers.
Nope.
I mean, you have very good assets once you do become the monarch. You could do something like play Court of Grace, lose the monarchy, make a 1/1, play Palace Jailer, take the monarchy back, and then if you can hold the ground for a turn, you start getting 4/4 angels.
He's also pretty close to field. Which is gonna make keeping it hard.
Yeah, there's also Punishing Fire, which is a very real concern.
Yep. It's a good card too.
There is.
Um,
All right. real talk, do you think you're going to win this game?
I don't. I was just considering
I would
looking at my
consider
clock.
conceding for clock here.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got another 2 minutes, 3 minutes really to think about your sideboarding, so feel free to make some adjustments.
This. Um, that doesn't actually help.
Yeah, that doesn't help as much as some other things. So about the only other thing I'd be thinking about in the sideboard is like, do you want that Council's Judgment more than something else that's in the deck? So just some raw math here. Right now, you are only sitting at 18 creatures. You could consider trimming Ether Vial.
That would never have occurred to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's blasphemy in any case in many cases because you really want to have it on turn one, but
Mhm.
you've cut four Thalias, two Spirited Labyrinths, and a Solitude from your main deck, so you're down a good number of creatures, and you didn't replace those with creatures. You replaced those with spells. So you
Yeah.
could consider like going down an Ether Vial or two to get some more raw bodies in there, or to just like get more utility.
That's really only has one target, so it's probably not good enough. Hmm.
Yeah, your opponent is probably playing two Sylvan Libraries, and they've just seen one both games.
Yeah. I don't know. I think on the play I'd rather keep the vial.
Okay,
So I'm gonna submit here, I
that's
think.
totally fine. Remember, there's not necessarily always a right and wrong answer with sideboarding. A lot of it is your approach. How are you going to play this game?
Um, I don't love it.
This hand doesn't leverage being on the play very well, but it stops a bunch of your opponent's good openers. This Brick Walls, Reclaimers, and Ragavans. Is that good enough for you, or do you want a proactive hand on the play?
I find that very difficult. My instinct is to mulligan here.
Okay, I would keep this hand, but if you want a mulligan, go ahead and mulligan, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, your your willingness to keep it is forcing me to reconsider.
You have 6 minutes on the clock. Fire a decision either way.
Oh,
It doesn't matter
yeah,
much. Okay.
faster than.
So your opponent doesn't have a bunch of things like planeswalkers that are going to sit and play and accrue value. Basically, all their win conditions we've seen are creatures. So a hand with 4 removal spells and 3 lands is pretty reasonable. Yep. All right.
Okay.
So we just eat that.
And then holding up plow versus porting.
I'd port. Ragavan makes things a little weird, but like when you can port, usually a good idea too.
Okay. What's your thought on flickering a Mox Diamond? Ah, rats.
Um, Prior to seeing that Ragavan there, that was something that was a great idea. Now that the Ragavan is there, we probably need to flicker our own planes if we even play the swords this turn. So you could just like play Vile and hold up double swords to plowshares, for example, in this turn cycle.
Sort of telegraphs, right?
You could
If
also
I'm not
play Flicker
mistaken.
Wisp and Blink of Plains. Like you have options.
Oh, I'd rather get the vial out
Sure.
and start ticking up. So I'm gonna do that.
So this might be a time where you do this in beginning of combat, so that if they happen to have yet another Ragavan, you also get it in this turn cycle.
That's a good tactic. I like it.
Little things, they add up.
Um,
Yeah, and this is exactly why I was so happy to keep a very removal spell heavy hand.
Interesting.
Do it. Just just get that jailer on board. That's fine.
Yeah, I could get the monarchy now while he doesn't have any creatures out.
Yeah, you have the Flicker Wisp to blink next turn.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So like even if they play a creature, it's totally okay. Beautiful. That potentially represents like Jitte equip next, or no, Jitte sideboarded out now, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Well, whatever. Like we can Flicker Wisp, remove a creature, end step Stoneforge, Cauldra, and then try to clear out the game in 4 turn cycles. This hand can get extremely aggressive if it needs to.
I know if I wasn't down on the clock, I wouldn't F6, but
Oh yeah, like sometimes the little edge is I don't have time to bluff here.
yeah,
Your opponent apparently has a pretty tough decision because like
yeah.
they're pretty low on clock too.
And they're also not playing a very fast deck.
No, like when you get into these like D&T versus Maverick, D&T versus 4 color loam type situations, um, you go to time in paper a decent amount or close to it. Yeah, now
That's
we're in an absolutely amazing position.
yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, this is good news. We have a lot of doors available to us, and we're probably going to just continuously draw some cards. So you should start thinking about what piece of equipment you're going to Stoneforge for, because that's your next decision point.
Yep. I'm leaning sword.
Sounds good.
Another night. Oh, Night of Autumn. Okay.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's gonna destroy file. Or, yeah.
Yep. All right. So put in your Stoneforge.
And I think Cauldra instead of sword equip is still better.
Um, sure. The world's kind of your oyster right now.
Do you plow the knight to get in for more? Or do you just attack with the two creatures?
I'd plow given your clock. So the real question is like whether or not you want to play around like Dash Ragavan taking the monarchy, but I don't know that it matters much.
We are now ahead on the clock.
Yeah, I'd just battle. Sure.
Sure.
You probably want to think about porting down your opponent's plateau just to make multiple activations of a grove in the next turn cycle harder. And I just F6 here.
Yep.
Your opponent takes the monarchy back, it doesn't actually matter because you can Flicker Wisp Jailer immediately.
You'll get knight back, but dredged. Okay.
Yeah, getting the knight back is not that big of a deal if you immediately remove it again, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Could Flicker, Cauldra, and play Stoneforge, or could play Equip Sword.
Um, lots of options. You got 3 minutes. I'd just make some decisions. I might not play that.
Oh,
Okay, that's
oops.
fine. Yeah, I told her to just make some decisions. It's whatever. You're very, very, very far ahead.
Oh, I could have used Mystic to put in Sword.
Yeah.
Instead of 1 extra damage, didn't matter there as much.
Again, the world is your oyster. Like you have 4 creatures that would survive a tabernacle at this point. You have creatures covered. You're winning combat.
Mm-hmm.
You're mostly trying not to time out. Like as long as you don't time out, you probably can't lose. And your opponent is lower on clock than you are by quite a bit. So yeah, and there's
Ooh.
the concession. All right, what do you think of your opening hand here?
Um, my instinct is to mulligan it, even though some of these lands could be very useful. They could also be quite dead.
Yeah, this is
With a blind, I would mulligan.
what I would call a high risk, low reward hand. Like there's some games where yes, double wasteland just immediately ends the game, but there's so many times where you're just gonna like have nothing.
Uh, I don't think no play until turn 3 is a viable keep either.
This hand is also quite weak. I would go to 5 rather than keep this.
I would keep that on 5.
Absolutely.
I throwing back probably probably two lands.
So
And
a plains goes back 100% of the time. I'm, very confident about
okay,
that. And then the question becomes like, do you want to keep an ether vial or do you want to keep the fourth land? What's your thoughts?
I suppose my reflex is to keep the vial, but I wonder if that's just ingrained bias towards it. I only have one creature in hand.
So if you keep the vial, your turn 1 play is vial. Your turn 2 play is Rashad Port. Your turn 3 play is probably Thalia plus Rashad Port, and that's your game plan. That's how you're going to play things out. So if you want to keep the vial, then which land goes back?
I
Do you
would
want
say
to keep white white, or do you want to keep both Port and Wasteland to lean into the mana denial plan harder?
the latter is what I would probably do.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. 100-second mulligan decision, which isn't great, but
Yeah, it's all about figuring out like how you're going to play out the game because like you just plotted out your first couple of turns, right?
yeah.
Okay, hold on. Before you,
Oh, sorry.
so you could have considered just straight up wastelanding your opponent and resetting the clock.
Yes.
Um, Now that you've played out the planes, you probably just want to jam the Aether Vial. All right, and notice there your opponent was like F6, right? So that probably means they don't have days and maybe don't even have access to days, or at least not immediate counter magic.
Tarmogoyf.
Ooh, so we are probably playing against either a bug midrange or bug delver deck.
Okay, I still like the port plan, I think.
Yep. So which land are you going to port?
Having seen Tarmogoyf, I want to port the Trop. I don't know if that makes any sense though.
Okay. Why do you want to port the Trop?
Because I'm guessing most of his onboard threats are green.
Okay. What do you care about the most in this turn cycle?
Abrupt Decay.
Okay. And
Uh,
if you say care the most about your Mother of Runes making it around the table, then wouldn't it make sense to port them off black, which is both Abrupt Decay and other removal spells like Fatal Push?
yes, it would.
Okay. I understand not wanting your opponent to get more threats on board, which is what the green mana does, but it's kind of disastrous for you if the Mother of Runes doesn't make it around the table, given your double mulligan. The Mother of Runes will allow you to potentially protect something like a Stoneforge Mystic in the future, and that's the sort of thing that will really drag you out of this game. Okay, no removal, which is great news.
Yes. Um, so my mind has gone to Thalia plus Wasteland plus Port.
Okay, sounds good.
And Thalia should come in as soon as possible if that's what I'm going to do, correct?
In many circumstances, yes. So there's some nuance here. If you violin the Thalia and your opponent has a 1 mana removal spell, they would probably use it to kill Thalia, but Mother of Runes is active, so that's not actually a line that matters anymore. You're probably safe to just violin the Thalia now. They also could respond with a Brainstorm, which doesn't actually matter here. Because, like, this also threatens to just be a Spirit of the Labyrinth.
Then the polluted delta means I don't know how much it matters.
So
Mobs,
the
I don't
question
know.
here is, what would you not want them to have two of? Does green matter or does black matter?
I presume they're running endurances.
Okay. So if you want to wasteland them off of green to make endurance harder, go ahead and take out the Trop.
I don't know what double black I'd care a lot about right now.
If they are not playing Delver and they're playing more of a mid-range deck, double black could represent something like Liliana the Last Hope or Liliana of the Veil.
Probably not playing Voidwalker. I don't see a lot of him.
Yeah, Dalthy Voidwalker did not see quite as much play as I was expecting.
It's a shame. I like it. Okay. Um, Port and pass,
I'd
I would
I'd
think.
play the plains
Okay.
because there's some situations where you are going to want to have white in play. What's your plan with your Aether Vial? Are you going to leave your Aether Vial at 3 for if you draw Flicker Wisps, or are you going to tick that up to 5 and use it to cheat Solitude in?
I was just considering that. Um, I would. I'm leaning towards leaving it on 3. I am making land drops for now, and I think casting Solitude for 5 is not outside the realm of possibility. And I'd lose a lot of utility if Vial gets off 3.
Okay,
That's my thought process.
that's fine. I just want to know what your plan is.
Yep. Leo. Really annoying. That makes port much worse.
Yep. Port is now not a card with real text.
That's humorous to me. I still don't have anything useful here, so I think play a land and pass.
Yeah, I would probably play the Rashadan port and not show that Caracas. If your opponent is playing Wasteland, you probably don't want to get that Caracas Wastelanded. So now I want to talk
Well,
about something that happened 2 turns ago.
okay.
You can go through their turn while I'm talking
Yes.
about this. So you ticked Vial up to 3 without really having a reason to tick up to the Vial to 3. And something to keep in mind is that if you don't have a reason to tick up a Vial to 3, you can just leave it at 2 for a while. Because it's oftentimes not disastrous if you have to wait a turn to do something like Vial in a Recruiter. Whereas if you drew a 2-drop, like say a Stoneforge Mystic, and you had kept that at 2, there's a pretty huge upside for just like having access to that play still. Now, when you have like a very proactive reason for if I hit this card, it's very important for me to tick it up this turn, that's totally fine.
That makes sense.
I'm not saying what you did is wrong, I just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, my thought process in that moment was that I had more 3s and enough lands to cast it to, but still having the 2 at instant speed was makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so is your current plan to hold this Solitude for Uro?
Um, Actually, no. My current plan was to use Solitude on Leo. They get only the 1 card, and then I've got Caracas for the Uro.
Okay.
Thinking that, um, interesting that they didn't want to bring Uro. Well, I've got the Caracas, but still, he would have drawn 2. So what I want to do here is flash in the Solitude, give him his 1 card, and then not have to worry about this effect
Sure.
anymore.
And that turns your Rashadan ports back on so that you do have the possibility of keeping your opponent off of Uro that way. We're going to start to run into the issue of like how many actual factual green or blue sources does your opponent have in their deck?
Okay, Force of Will. Not what I needed to see.
Nope. I mean, it happens.
I should have used the port.
So in terms of play patterns,
Mhm.
something to keep in mind here is that your opponent has had creatures that are larger than your own creatures for a while, but they haven't attacked in to a mom. So they haven't made you go like mom protect.
Right,
So just kind of like keep that play pattern in the back of your mind. It seems like your opponent is only going to attack if like they have a removal spell to clear that mom.
right.
They're not doing the bluff checks. So something you can consider here is you can consider bouncing Leovold here. You untap the Caracas, you can then bounce the Uro. I don't know if that's something you want to do because it is going to give your opponent some cards, but if you want to decrease their board presence and tie up their mana, that's a line that's available to you. If you
I
if you if you think you're going to end up bouncing the Uro anyway,
Yeah, I think I prefer that for that reason. Okay, yeah.
and you had a Rashadan Port activation, then that would have cleared up. So you could have ported down that tropical island or the fetch land there as well.
Right.
Just something to keep in
Because
mind for the future.
Yep, because Leo was no longer. That's right. Okay. Any reason to bounce Uro now?
I mean, not particularly. You're probably not expecting Stifle from your opponent or anything.
As far as which lands to port, my instinct was to Bayous,
Sure.
but I don't know really why.
Yeah, your goal is to probably try and keep your opponent off of green. That's probably more realistic than keeping them off of blue. Oh, so yeah, okay.
Okay. Means he probably has a removal spell since he hasn't been doing this.
Right.
I
Now,
also have the extra mom, so mom protecting herself on the block might be worth it.
yeah, if your opponent doesn't play out a Leovold or an Uro this turn, that's certainly not bad for you.
Yeah.
You could also just wait a turn, take 4, and then say, like, I have double mom for the future now that I know that they have this removal spell. That's not the best. That's not the worst use of your life either. You could also just straight up chump block with Athalia and say, like, I have another one of these, whatever.
Um.
I'd probably take 4.
Okay.
So you're really hoping for, like, a Recruiter or a Stoneforge to just, like, really break this game open.
Hmm. Well, that's a stone forge.
That sure is.
All right. Um, Now he's got 7 now. That's still too much advantage. I think I'll just wait till the end of his turn and flash in Mystic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So something to keep in mind about Leovold is that the extra cards you give your opponent matters a lot less if your opponent can't actually effectively do anything with them.
Right. This is a good question. I like Cauldra because of its resistance to
Yeah,
this color removal.
Cauldra dominates combat. You probably want to take that. You
Yeah.
probably want to bounce your opponent's Leovold here. And then you probably want to just tap down those fetch lands once Leovold is out of play. Just force your opponent to fetch, make their Sylvan Library worse in the future. Or limit their options for your next turn cycle. You also could have considered bouncing the Leovold in the second main phase to see if you could force any. Okay, your opponent is just done with your shit.
Surprising. So does that mean they have very few ways to beat Cauldra? Is that what that meant?
Well, generally speaking, you should expect a bug deck to have almost no ways to answer a Cauldra. Generally speaking, they have a hard enough time answering a Batterskull, and Cauldra is indestructible. So, yeah.
Um, so I like Rest in Peace. They're doing a lot of graveyard stuff. Well, Uro and Tarmogoyf minimally.
That qualifies as a lot of graveyard stuff here. You know,
Okay.
if the vast majority of your opponent's threats are graveyard based, like that's going to be good.
Um, but I'm not sure what else here.
Okay. So it looks like your opponent is a bug mid-range to bug control deck, right? They're somewhere on that spectrum. We didn't see Delvers, we didn't see Dazes, we saw things like Sylvan Library. They're probably a little bit slower. So if your opponent is playing a slower deck, what do you bring in?
Court of Grace.
Okay, great.
Um,
Now, if your opponent is playing a slower deck, you're going to expect to see some Planeswalkers, right? So
sure,
then maybe you start thinking about the Council Judgment as well.
that's fair.
You can
And
also consider Path to Exile. It's maybe medium. It's another answer to a Tarmogoyf. It's another answer to an Uro. It's another answer to a Leovold. But of the cards in that pile over there, that's the least good.
yeah, we also saw. It's not to say he isn't playing them, but we also saw 0 basics.
I agree with your assessment. We don't know yet.
Right.
Okay,
Um,
so we need to start thinking about what's coming out.
well, that's tougher. I actually like most of our cards. I think I'm not crazy about Solitude. I'm not crazy about the 2-for-1 in most cases.
Okay,
Um,
we're probably going to swap Jitte out just like we did previously.
I think that's an easy one. I
Um,
like.
Generally
Uh,
speaking, I don't tend to like Sanctum Prelate versus bug decks because they tend to have a good number of answers to it.
okay.
So you're taking that out. You're taking the Solitude out.
And
So
two
now you
more.
need 2 more cuts.
Maybe Spirits. He is doing a lot of draw.
Spirit's pretty good.
He's doing a cantrip deck.
I would consider Mom Thalia, Flicker Wisp, Vial. 20 seconds.
Oh, I think splitting feels weird actually. Now that I clicked the cards, but
Okay, well, we'll talk about it before the next
yeah,
game.
yeah, that was a time crunch decision. Okay. I have lands, I have spells. I like the early removal. I love Recruiter and Flicker Wisp. Love having no 2-drop. I don't know, I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning towards keep.
That's about where I'm at, yeah. So this hand is good against some of your opponent's more aggressive hand and medium against some of their more controlling hands. You don't have early pressure here, but you have a ton of draws that are good. You have Vials, Moms, Thalias, Stoneforges, Spirits that all make this hand absolutely incredible. I think within 2 draws, there's a very good chance that you find a playable card.
Yeah.
And in addition to those things I listed, Port and Wasteland also improve this hand pretty significantly.
Recruiter, that makes sense. Ha.
Yep.
That's the Thoughtseize curse.
You probably won't, yeah. We spent a lot of time talking. We're hoping to
Yeah,
win this one in 2 games.
that would be nice.
So the good news here is that since our opponent's deck is a little bit slower, like they're not on board yet either.
Storm.
So to start planning ahead, what are you thinking about recruitering for?
Stoneforge was my initial thought, but Spirit wouldn't be bad either. He's been doing a lot of drawing.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of options. Like you could get a Stoneforge, you could get a Spirit, you could get a Skyclave apparition. Never mind, we don't need to think about it.
Yep. Library. Yep.
That's fine. That just probably means that we're gonna play out a naked Flicker Wisp to pressure their life total.
Yeah. All
So an interesting micro decision there is like whether or not you actually play out the Rishadan port on that turn. If you play out the Rishadan port, it gives them perfect information about your hand.
right.
But if you do play out the Rishadan port, it makes a top decked Wasteland better because it allows you to more aptly
Mhm.
sort of mess with your opponent's mana and say like target green green or blue blue or black black or something.
Yeah, I think
I,
the ingrained heuristic for me was not playing the non-basic if I didn't need it that turn, but that's a good point.
yeah, it again, it's not one of those like one of those is clearly right and wrong, and you might just want to nab this just so you can permanently answer it.
Yeah. He knew about that plow. So
Yeah,
trade
they
these.
probably just need to power through.
Yep. Okay. I'll make my
So
attack.
make your attack first.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I think it's a lot of pressure playing
So
out the Flicker Wisp again.
yeah, I think this is like let's get on board and see if we can close out this game. You can just flicker wisp one of your lands here.
So I can port. Yeah.
Yep. The other good line you had available to you was to flicker wisp your flicker wisp and then flicker out Sylvan Library.
Ah, that's clever.
Yeah, the lines that you can start doing once you flicker wisps get pretty dumb. Another somewhat common one when you're playing against a bug deck is to flicker wisp a flicker wisp, and then flicker wisp your original flicker wisp again, so that you always have one flicker wisp floating out, so you can better play around like a toxic deluge. Um, that sort of thing's not super common right now, though. All right, so I'd crash in for 6,
If
and
Leovold is worth swordsing, I think Thalia and Port are pretty compelling for resource denial.
so I would swords the Leovold. So the reason why is because very specifically, you have 5 mana available, which is swords plus Thalia plus a port activation. All right.
So I probably should have played Thalia first.
No.
No?
Yeah, so go ahead and play your planes and Thalia out. That's just totally fine to do. If that had resolved, you still would have been able to port your opponent and tax their mana further.
Right.
Yeah, but if you play the Thalia prior to that stuff, then you lose the ability to Rashad and port your opponent. The good news here is that like our opponent is still on a 2-turn clock from the Flicker Wisps. Yeah, see this is the sort of stuff we want to see right now because this is, you know, indicative of like them having to spend mana because they don't have what they need currently. Oh yeah, that's a Snapcaster brainstorm.
Yeah,
That is
that's
So this is essentially, the big gambit for them. Like they need to find something that's going to answer these flicker wisps, or sorry, they had to ponder, or they're just dead in a turn cycle. All right, they did not shuffle.
Ooh, okay. Thanks. Uh,
I mean,
you
play it
play
out.
it?
Yeah,
Okay. I didn't know if bluffing something was more important than a violet.
yeah. I mean, like your opponent
Um,
either has like a toxic deluge or double removal spell, or they die.
yeah,
Because
that's
like
right.
both flicker wisps have to be answered here.
Yeah, they're not doing the thing because of a card I might have. That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, when your opponent is in a situation where they have to just call 100% of the time.
Interesting. I don't see really a reason to block.
I mean, this smells like Toxic Deluge to me,
Oh,
and your
then
opponent is
that
just
is
trying to get a couple points of damage on the way out.
deluge for one. That would hurt.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep. Okay.
that's rough.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
That shrinks that Tarmogoyf quite a bit.
So, opponent is only going to get to select their draws with Sylvan Library exactly once, and they're choosing right here. So their Sylvan Library loses a lot of power, and now any 1 point of damage ends this game.
That was a nice draw.
Okay, so there are various degrees of risk that you can take here. Um, have we used any equipment this game? I don't think we have, right?
No.
So if you want to take a high degree of risk, you could Stoneforge plus Batterskull in this turn cycle. I don't necessarily think that's great. I like Stoneforging at their end step and trying to get Cauldra and finish them that way.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. Okay.
So I think that's just your opponent saying like, if I win this game, it is because I have Tarmogoyf. And
And
like
Uro.
I
Yeah.
need to get this show on the road if I'm going to kill you before your top decks deal 1 point of damage to me. But one of the cool things about the current situation is that the Cauldra is going to be pretty castable even if the Stoneforge itself dies.
He did not shuffle the ponder.
Now, you could also choose to just get a.
Oh,
Okay, it doesn't matter. They didn't have anything. GG's.
yeah.
All right, what do you think of the opening hand?
I think similar to our first match that I like it, um, especially since now we have things to do even if Vial gets countered somehow, and we're on the draw with a lot of 2 drops, so we would only need an additional land. I like this.
All right, sounds good. This is a hand with very good inevitability if the game goes long. Like you have like Vile plus Recruiter for Flickerwisp chains. The other thing I like about this is that you have stuff for a pretty wide variety of matchups. Like if you get a turn one Ragavan, you have Swords to Plowshares. If it's a combo deck, you have two different Hate Bears in your hand.
You didn't roll
Um,
the 5.
yeah, there's a pretty good chance your opponent is playing combo.
Hmm. Well, that hurts a little bit. Oh no, you
All
failed.
right. So the good news is your opponent does not have a second land there. They are just believing in the heart of the cards. Oh my god, what a beautiful draw.
Um,
I would not show them that this turn.
okay. So you would play out the vial
Yeah,
then?
Plains Vile. And if they miss on a land drop, you probably just instantly win.
Oh, rough.
Okay. So the good news is that your opponent is going to lose a large amount of life, and then you're going to tap a Caracas.
Mhm.
It becomes scary if they can produce a second creature, specifically a non-legendary one. So like an Archon of Cruelty is a little bit of a problem because they can just like grief, take your swords to plowshares, play an Archon or something.
Okay. Suppose there's no reason not to be F6 tier. 2 chancellors.
Those are annoying but beatable. Two of them probably would not be beatable.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Could
there
play
goes the
plow.
swords to plowshares. That would answer the Chancellor.
And does the grief come back or another chancellor?
Okay, you're probably safe to go to the next game. Like you can bounce the Grizzlebrand, then take 9, and then like not play spells really.
Okay.
If we were on the play and like we had the like vial ticked up by one already, like we could maybe talk, but
We have a lot of cards that are good in this matchup.
oh, absolutely.
Um, is Deafening Silence good since their explosive turns often include Dark Ritual and
Deafening
uh,
silence means that a lot of the things like Dark Ritual and Lotus Petal lose a lot of their oomph. It also means that it becomes harder to do something like Grief, take your thing, and then also go off.
right?
You're probably gonna end up boarding that in.
Um,
Some of the things like Relic Order and Council's Judgment end up being in that category where you're probably not bringing them in, but
mhm.
they're in the conversation.
Okay, so I don't think Mom does much for us in this matchup.
Mom's not particularly potent. That's probably a safe cut. She can do things, but it's kind of whatever. So
Um,
what else don't you like?
I think Apparition has very few targets.
I agree with that.
I think Jite probably doesn't do anything.
I agree with that.
Um, let's see what else. I like Solitude here actually.
I
Um,
agree with that.
I like Sanctum. I like Jailer. Oh, Jailer's yeah, I like Jailer.
Jailer is a little slow, but
Yeah,
Jailer is a tutorable answer. Maybe the question you ask is, do you need both Jailer and Solitude?
yeah, maybe not. And of the two, although it's a 2-for-1, their action turn is long before 4 or 5.
Yeah. Another question to ask is like, how many Swords to Plowshares effects do you actually want? So like, do you want the full 6 of 4 swords plus 2 Path to Exiles? That's something to be thinking about.
Oh, so maybe not the paths.
Well, it also could be maybe not 2 of the Swords to Plowshares.
Ah,
So like, you play a 2-2 split.
um, okay. So how many? Oh, Batter Skull seems like it's. I don't know if it's too slow.
You probably need 2 pieces of equipment of some nature, just so if the
Okay.
first one is taken, the second one becomes like still a thing that matters. Something like this is fine.
Um, Caracas is good, so is Surgical, but don't love the Cauldra, and it takes me a while to do anything else. If he has a Thought Seize,
Ignore the
ooh,
Cauldra. What do you think of this as a 6-card hand?
I think normally it would be okay, but I'm worried it's too slow against this deck.
Okay.
Because I guess it's fine, but against anything that starts with hand disruption, I feel pretty weak.
Okay. Um, so what would your faster hand look like? You would basically have to have Deafening Silence, right?
I suppose that's true. Yeah, it's my only 1 mana hate other than Surgical.
So this is a hand that ignores Grizzlebrand. This is a hand that has a turn 1 Vial and very good things to put in. And it's a hand that just beats your opponent if they go for it without disruption. This seems like a keep to me.
Okay, interesting. Please don't have a Chancellor. He did not.
Yeah, like, is this the perfect hand? No. Like, it could have a second land, it could have a Deafening Silence, but this is fine. When you're playing Death and Taxes, you don't always just get to have the hand that bullies the combo deck.
Right.
Like, that's just not your lot in life. But if you were mulliganing, you'd basically be mulliganing for one of like Deafening Silence or the one of Grafdigger's Cage.
Well, that
Yeah,
hurt a
so this
little.
this is targeting them, so you will probably have a great opportunity for a surgical blowout.
No, it's not. It's targeting us.
Oh, sorry, you're Jacob of Amber. I'm used to myself.
Yeah.
All right, my bad.
Which, all right. Oh well. Archon of Cruelty.
Okay,
Invoked Grief. Taking Thalia, I presume.
makes sense to me. All right, so they've got 2 cards, so they need Mana Source plus Reanimation Spell, or they need to have Reanimate naturally. All right, they're digging.
Yeah. Sarah's Innocent? I don't know
That card's a little annoying.
this. Oh, joy. Okay.
All right, so here's to hoping we draw a land.
No.
No such luck.
That would have been nice though.
Yeah, because then we would have gotten Containment Priest.
Yeah.
All right, ye old deck thinning. All right, so we have to dodge this turn. If we dodge this turn, we win. Oh, so now it has to be Reanimate.
Or Dark Ritual, right?
Well, they were going to go down to 1 card, so it
Oh,
had to
yeah.
be Reanimate there.
Huh. Okay. Um, so actually, I can recruit for Containment Priest at instant speed, right?
Correct. So you can just wait.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I do it now then.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Good stuff. All right. Is there anything you want to change being on the draw?
Think so.
Okay. On the draw, you could consider having more copies of Swords to Plowshares because there's a greater chance that your opponent just like tries to floop, like say a Chancellor or an Archon into play or something like that early.
Mm.
Uh, your
Um,
your Deafening Silences also become a little bit worse on the draw. Not necessarily bad, but if your opponent has the
right.
turn one, they have the turn one, right?
I like the idea of going up on here. I'm not sure in lieu of what.
Okay. You could trim Ether Vials again.
That's true. We're down to
So
9.
you're at 19 creatures. You've boarded out 4, 5, 6. You boarded out 7 creatures. You brought just a Containment Priest in, I think. But like
Yes.
Ether Vial is a card you would be very happy to see in the opener, but in this matchup you wouldn't always play out an Ether Vial on turn 1 anyway. Deafening Silence, for example, is something that you would play over Ether Vial.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Or cage. Oh, no white. Come on.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you're working
One
with
loss.
an extra piece of information here. So you know that your opponent has kept a 7-card hand. So you have a hand that has 2 pieces of free interaction, um, and kind of like 1.5 pieces of mana disruption, but no ability to actually cast your hate bear.
Wow.
What's your thought here?
Um, I'm leaning towards keeping. Um, I'm leaning towards keeping because I like. I would say I like surgical and solitude, which makes a use of one of the white cards that I can't cast yet, and I don't dislike the wasteland port combination if they can't turn one.
Okay.
Yeah,
This
I'm leaning towards keep, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is definitely sketchy. Like this definitely can fall on its face and fail, but you do have 2 free pieces of interaction on the draw when your opponent kept 7. I can see keeping it. This is a
I'm gonna
this is a
I'm gonna
rare
keep it.
instance of like it being somewhat reasonable to keep a no lander. Or well, a no white lander. It does mean that some of your top decks are much, much worse. So, for example, if you draw Deafening Silence on turn 1, you can't actually play that.
That will hurt my soul slightly. Again, no Chancellor reveal, which is nice. Actually, that might be the pause we're on, in retrospect, since we both kept and it's not in his upkeep yet. That's a shame.
Just keep in mind you do have some lines that kind of get around that, right? Like you can
Yeah,
evoke
use
a solitude without a target and then surgical, or you can like surgical a fetch land or something and then solitude. So like there are some costly ways of getting around that.
yeah. game he did fetch for a non-basic immediately, although that was largely because he needed the red for faithless looting.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the Reanimator deck does not expect the game to go particularly long, so a lot of times it's fine to just grab the non-basics. And they can often just do their thing off of, like, one land anyway. At this point, I would assume the opponent has, like, went to go and grab a pizza out of the oven or something, rather than, like, they are really tanking about a decision.
They're back with the Chancellor reveal.
Okay. Alright.
Yep.
Alright.
Okay.
So, do you want to go for the Solitude line?
I
Solitude, junk the
I
trigger, surgical it?
that's what I was thinking, yeah.
Go for it.
Well, that's a good question. I
I would,
think
I
I'd
would,
ra-
go ahead.
I was gonna say I'd rather keep the Mystic around, I think.
Why?
Um, well, I guess closing the game quickly doesn't matter if I'm keeping him from doing his thing. So actually, maybe the Thalia is better.
I would keep the Thalia. The Thalia fits better into this, like, Wasteland Rishadan port based line that you're potentially going to do. Oh my gosh, we got the concession. Our hand was so bad.
Wow.
You love to see
I
it.
I was triple and quadruple guessing that keep.
It worked out. All right. What do you think of this opener?
I don't love it. We have cards, we have lands and spells to cast with them, but we have a double Thalia and 2 equipment, which I generally don't love seeing in my opening hand. Yet Thalia into Jitte does feel good, but it's slow.
This is a hand that doesn't have a strong plan, right? Like, this is, like, land pass, land Thalia. If Thalia gets answered, Thalia again with Caracas backup. If you play the Jitte on turn 3, it requires you to tap the Caracas, which means you're not protecting the Thalia. It's kind of an awkward hand. Like, it's keepable, but your average 6 might be better. This one could
Since it,
go either way. I lean towards it being a mulligan, but I wouldn't fault you for keeping it.
I was leaning mulligan. It feels like a 6 already with the double legend, and I know there's some
Yeah, with the
value in
double
that,
legend
but
and the batter skull, it's pretty awkward. Whereas this hand is
this
just so
feels
much
better.
better.
Yeah. Um, I I feel like the highest variance cards here are Spirit and Plow. Um, I
So
don't
there
want to
there are
keep.
3 cards that you can consider putting back here. You can consider putting back Spirit, Flicker Wisp, or Swords to Plowshares. The Swords to Plowshares is dead in many matchups. The Spirit of the Labyrinth is mediocre in many matchups. The Flicker Wisp is the slowest. If you're playing against combo, you'll be very happy to have Spirit. If you're playing against something Delvery, you'll be very happy to have Swords. Where's your head at?
Um, Having reconsidered because of the point you just made, I'm thinking Flicker Wisp.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, depending on my mood, I probably would have put back either the Swords to Plowshares or the Flicker Wisp there. There's just, like, so many, like, Ragavan Deathrite, or not Deathrite, like, Ragavan Dragon Rage Channeler style decks right now that I probably don't want to throw back the Swords to Plowshares.
Yep, and this is exactly why I ended up deciding what I did. Uh, we hadn't played the Blue-Red Delver deck yet, and I know it's a gambler's fallacy, but I felt like our time was nigh. So I think Wasteland the Volk first, so we can't get dazed.
Yep. No.
You're right. Wait. Um,
Why are you
although
waiting until your opponent's turn to do this? There's a very important reason. What?
force of negation.
There you go.
So Okay. On his upkeep before he plays an island, though, right?
Correct. Because you already played around Daze by destroying Volcanic Island, and now if your opponent protects that, it has to be Force of Will.
Okay. Um, they were relying on those treasure tokens, I think.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the Delver deck keeps a one-lander and just gets absolutely wrecked.
Yep. All right. Blue-red Delver, probably.
Yeah, blue-red Delver or adjacent deck that probably plays out
Yeah.
similarly. There's a lot of like Ragavan, Dragon Rage Channeler, blue-red X, Mush floating around. Most of it's probably going to be played out the same way.
So I certainly like Sword. I think I like Paths. I like maximizing my answer to the early threats.
Okay.
They do some stuff with the graveyard, but I'm not sure it's sufficient reason to bring in Rest in Peace. I don't know.
Well, let's move it over and put it in the maybe pile. And I think there's one other card that should be in your maybe pile.
Um, Council's Judgment to answer
Yeah.
Murktide.
Yep. Council's Judgment is just one more answer to a Murktide. It's one more answer to, say, a True Name Nemesis, if that's one of the things your opponent is playing in a flex slot. And like you're totally happy to trade a Ragavan for a Council's Judgment or something like that. If you're in a top deck war. So let's figure out what we don't want.
Um, Generally, when we've brought in Sword, we've taken out Jitte, but I like it against many of their threats, with the exception of Murktide. So I don't know if it follows we do it again. Um,
So generally speaking, like you are probably going to have a relatively good matchup versus this deck, right? Like you
yes.
have a massive crap ton of removal, and you kind of have to decide how am I going to board and what are the weakest cards here.
Mm,
So
right.
what do you have a boarding plan for this matchup?
I don't.
Okay.
I think I genuinely shy against this deck with a 2-for-1. I don't love Solitude. I don't know if I love 4 equipment, so I was thinking maybe a Batter Skull.
You want to cut the life gain equipment versus the aggro deck?
No, no, you're right. Um, so I'm not sure.
Okay. If you're not sure, cut recruiters. They're slow.
Okay.
You've just brought in a bunch of cheaper removal, and Palace Jailer might be a little bit worse if you're not tutoring for it. We can use this as a starting point, and we can talk about like sideboarding a little bit more in between rounds.
Okay. Recruiter being too slow. That's a fair point. I wouldn't have thought of that. It's pretty weak to Wasteland. One white source. I don't have a second for Skyclave, although I do like swords in Stoneforge.
So are you thinking keep or mull? Because you gave me
Um,
mixed
I'm
signals.
yeah, I'm leaning towards Mull.
Okay. What would your better hand look like?
More stable mana base, but with similar answers and threats.
Okay. Ignore the Skyclave apparition in your hand. What would you think of the other cards that are there as a 6-card hand?
Generally good, but I'd still be concerned about the Caracas being my only white source.
Okay. Would you mulligan that 6-card hand?
Probably not.
Then I
Probably
might
not
keep
to
this
5.
one. There's some degree of risk here, but you're up a game, you have an answer to a turn 1 Ragavan, and you have great cards for the matchup.
Yeah,
The hand's not perfect, the hand has an issue, but the hand only has a real issue if the opponent has Wasteland and they Wasteland you.
that's right.
If the opponent does not have Wasteland, this hand is fantastic and just about perfect for the matchup.
Now that's interesting. So Dragon's Rage Channeler does present recurring value, but it's slightly less scary than a Ragavan. but I still think waiting on the Aether Vial a turn is okay.
So let me ask you this question. If you got to resolve one of either Source of Plowshares or Aether Vial, which one would you want to resolve?
I think Aether Vial.
Okay, so you might want to consider playing Aether Vial around days. Another
Okay.
thing you can do here is just say, hey, you mulliganed, I didn't. I can wasteland you and try to play that mana denial game.
That's true. I hadn't thought. I like that plan now that you say it.
So a lot of times if someone goes and leads on a Delver, your thought is, I need to worry about this Delver. But a lot of times if you just like junk their land and then they don't cantrip and they have a 1/1 that, maybe turns into a 3/2 later, but they're not doing other things, you're going to pull ahead. You don't always want to do that because, like, when you're behind on board, having no mana sources in play is kind of rough. But it's just a Dragon Rage channeler right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna try that plan.
Note this would be utter suicide versus a Ragavan,
Right.
but resetting a clock versus a Dragon Rage channeler is totally fine. And that's a great draw.
That is a great draw. So we still have the day's risk. So I think planes and plow, or hold up the plow in case they dash a Ragavan.
Well, if you are going to plow something, you probably want to plow now because you don't want to give
Right.
them more Dragon Rage channeler value because, like, two of them getting triggers at the same time increases the chances that they turn into 3/3s.
Yep, that's true. Um,
So the big question
yeah,
this turn is, do you want to potentially get value out of your Aether Vial for later by playing it earlier, or do you want to, like, play Sword the Plowshares now to decrease the chance that you just die quickly due to flipping Dragon Rage channelers?
I'm leaning towards the plow plan.
Okay. So now next turn, you could, for example, play a Vial around 8 days if you wanted, and then play Mother of Runes, or vice versa.
Hmm.
You'll have some options. Although honestly, I think if your opponent had days, they just cash it in on protecting that second Dragon Rage channeler there.
I think that's true.
Because not only would it protect a Dragon Rage channeler, but it would just make them more likely to grow in the future.
Did not shuffle the ponder.
Great.
Could have been for that Volk. Okay. I like playing Vile. Hmm,
All right, so you're always playing the planes this turn, right? So we can just
Yep.
make that play. So
Yeah.
which one of Vile or Mom do you want to play around Source to Plow, or sorry, around Days, or do you even want to play the Mom this turn if Vile resolves? You have some options.
Yeah. I like playing Vile first.
Okay, so let's do that and get our information. All right, so now do you want to play Mom so that Mom is active next turn, or do you want to play Mom off Vile and have it be a surprise?
I'd rather have Mom active next turn, I think.
Okay.
Would I?
So the
I think.
upside of having Mom active is that Mom can protect Stoneforge, and the upside of, like, playing a Mom now as well is that if your opponent has Lightning Bolt, the Mom can eat that, and then maybe the Stoneforge lives next turn. Your call. There's reasons to do it either way.
I actually think I'd prefer to wait.
Okay, sounds good.
I don't feel like I'm under a lot of pressure right now, and I like the Mom into Stoneforge um, Aether Vial chain.
Yep, that's totally reasonable. Um, at the time, your opponent also did not have an instant in the graveyard yet, and that would have given them a reason to put an instant into the graveyard.
Grim Lavamancer.
All right.
Okay.
Well, there is a very odd punish for not playing out Mom. That
Yep.
is what it is. All right, where's your head at?
Um, my head was at maybe, ah, shoot. Well, where I went was maybe casting Skyclave this turn. Um, I know
That sounds
it
good.
plays into days, but and then as far as I was thinking the Dragon Rage channel it, but the Grim Lavamancer represents a lot of damage for this creature base.
The Grim Lavamancer needs to go here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So avoiding Daze or Force here is pretty important. But if we do so, we're in an absolutely incredible position. Yeah. So now we have a Mom coming in, followed by a Stoneforge, and like then a Flicker Wisp to either like reset the Stoneforge, reset a piece of equipment, remove another creature, kill a token. Oop, we're responding to that.
Yep, that's pretty good against Vile.
But pretty bad against this Flicker Wisp that we're going to use to nuke one of their creatures.
Oh, that's right. That's a risk. Mom, of course. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll have a couple of really neat lines available to you on your turn. Oh, yeah. uh,
Wow.
God, I love it.
Okay. That is a unique answer to that card. Oh, he's empty. Okay.
Yep,
So I guess I'm just casting Flicker Wisp and probably Wastelanding.
sounds good.
Guess it doesn't really matter what order. And targeting the Murktide region.
Yep.
And am I taking him off the color?
So, it's probably better to take off the Caracas. The reason to take off Volcanic Island is specifically another Murktide Regent. We don't know how many white cards they're playing, but this takes them off a color completely. You can also consider attacking in.
I was just thinking that I think if he wants to trade the priest for the apparition, I think we probably come out better for that.
Yeah, the question is like, is it better for you to make that trade defensively? Like, will they attack with a containment priest?
Oh,
I
I
don't know
yeah,
that they will.
yeah. I'm gonna make the attack. Oh, okay.
So you could play around a.
Oh shoot,
Oh, that was bad.
that was silly of us.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. All right. That one's on me.
I mean, it is just a 3/3.
Yeah, I was so focused on getting the Cauldra in this turn cycle.
Same. Um,
Trade's
I
probably okay. It's whatever.
you think?
You can also
Okay.
like not block, and you could choose to get a Jitte instead if you wanted, and go like Jitte attack, kill both of those 1/1s.
Oh, that's no, I am. Think Cauldra here though.
Yeah, I mean Cauldra is pretty dominating from this board position.
Now, so you from what I learned earlier, leaving it on 2 poses very little risk here,
Yeah.
right?
It's great if you draw 2-drop, and it's fine if you draw 3-drop because like you'll just tick it up next turn. Beautiful.
Oh, and the Crocus is nice for Rag. That's good too.
Yep. So your opponent is currently Hellbent. If you intend on getting Jitte, you can just Violin Stoneforge right now and put Jitte into play.
We don't want to leave Caracas up for Ragavan.
That's an option. So you can also just like leave Caracas up for Ragavan, end step put in Stoneforge, get Sword of Fire and Ice, or Batterskull.
I think I'm gonna wait.
Okay, sounds good. If you want to Violin the Stoneforge, you can get a free block on a 1/1 here.
I should have done that. I progressed to blocks too quickly.
It's fine.
Open again. Okay.
Again, I don't think it super matters here. I think this game is over. All right, so you've got choices. What are you thinking?
I was thinking sword.
Okay.
But actually, Jitte probably does this. Sword draws, but I think Jitte probably does the better thing. It mops up 2 more. He just conceded after telling me that my top decks were unreal.
Yeah, I have this player blocked. They're kind of a butthead.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
Yeah.